On behalf of the Institute of Outdoor Recreation and Tourism, or IORT, at Utah State University, we want to welcome you to the third of our 9 sessions of the Red Emerald Resilience Training Program. This training series is supported by the Utah Office of Tourism's Destination Development and Partner Relations team, and my name is Danya Ramori. I am the director of the Wallace Stegner Center's Environmental Dispute Resolution Program, which is based at the University of Utah. I have the pleasure of being an IART partner and will be facilitating today's session. As you can probably hear, I'm recovering from a cold, so I'm going to apologize for my kind of husky voice today. Hopefully I won't be sniffling too much. And as we say today, thankfully it's just a head cold. It's not COVID. So to start us off, I want to just say a little bit about the background of the Red Emerald Resilience Training Series. As many of you know, probably some of you all too well, the COVID-19 pandemic resulted in serious economic setbacks and challenges for the tourism industry and many destination communities throughout Utah and across the nation. Many businesses are still recovering and are learning how to adapt to this post-pandemic world. And to address this need, the Utah Office of Tourism and IORT came together to build this webinar training series with the purpose of helping Utah's tourism industry and local businesses recover from COVID-19 and become more resilient to future shocks. We consulted with industry leaders and business owners throughout the state via interviews and a survey, and we used the results of those interviews and the survey to inform the creation of this series. The topics and design of the training series reflect what we heard was most important. Our ultimate hope in conducting this training series is that through sharing best practices, strategies, lessons learned, and success stories, we can help Utah's tourism industry and businesses thrive in an ever-changing world. For the full training program, we encourage you to check out the training program website. I'm going to put that link in the chat so it's there for you all. And again, we encourage you to take a look at that. We will have recordings of our past sessions there as well as registrations for our future sessions. As you'll see, the training series is organized into 3 different segments. The first segment is on communication for resilience. The second focuses on resources for resilience. And the third will be on planning for resilience. Today's webinar is the third in the Communicating for Resilience series and will explore strategies for how to prepare for the return of international guests and visitors. Today's session will specifically focus on things the tourism industry and businesses can do. That said, we expect that the topics we will cover will be relevant to anybody who's really interested in this topic of the return of international guests. We are joined by 3 special guests who will be discussing this topic and sharing their wisdom. Includes Rachel Bremer, the Tourism Director of Global Markets for the Utah Office of Tourism. Lance Syrett, I learned it rhymes with pirate, Syrett, Lance Syrett, a resort-level hotel guest manager for Ruby's Inn, which is in Bryce Canyon City, and Raelene Davis, the Vice President of Marketing and Operations for Ski Utah. Each of our speakers brings a unique perspective on the topic of educating or of welcoming and encouraging the return of international visitors. Thank you to all of our speakers for joining us today to share your wisdom. In a moment, we'll have them join us, but for now, I want to say a few more things to get us going for the day. For the audience, a few important things we want you to know. This session is being recorded. We will share the session recording along with a webinar summary on the website, which I shared via chat previously. In a moment, we're going to jump into the interactive presentation. And throughout the presentation, we want you who are on the webinar to know what to expect and how to engage. So we're going to ask you some questions that we want you to respond to throughout the webinar. We're also going to take your questions for the panelists throughout the webinar. And how this is going to work, we want to keep your questions to the panelists separate from your responses to the prompts we're going to ask you. So if you have questions for the panelists, please submit those using the Q&A function on your Zoom screen, and you can find that at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We'll address those questions if and as we have time throughout the webinar. Again, we're going to ask you a few questions throughout the webinar, and so we're going to do that via the chat function. So I'll put a prompt into the chat and ask you to respond via the chat. When responding via the chat, please make sure that your responses are going to everyone, the panelists and all of our attendees. So to recap, Please use the Q&A function to submit your questions to the panelists. Please use the chat function, again, you can find it at the bottom of your Zoom screen, to respond to the prompts and questions we are going to send to you. So without further ado, let's give this audience engagement a try. Again, I'm going to put a prompt into the chat. I'm going to ask you to respond via the chat, and please make sure that your responses are going to all panelists and all attendees, and that way everybody can see what you have to say. So if you don't already have your chat function open, I'm going to ask you to do so, and I'm going to ask you to respond via the chat to this question of how would you describe the current status of international visitors or guests in your region? For example, are you seeing a lot of international guests, not seeing very many? Would you like to see more? Where are people coming from if they're coming? Any way you want to respond to that question. Again, please type your response into the chat, and you can just hit enter when you are ready to do so. And we'll give a moment for these responses to come in via chat. And I'm seeing some people indicating what region they're in. That's great. If you want to indicate what region you're in so people have a sense of what's going on in different regions, please feel free to do so. And give just a little bit more time to see if we can get a few more responses in the chat. While a few more are coming in, I'm seeing for some places like the Zion National Park region, international guests are starting to show up again. Some places that are usually overrun are just starting again to see some international guests. Seeing some primarily from Mexico. Cache County, not seeing very many, would like to see more. Kind of a similar theme that I'm seeing in the chat. Interesting, again, seeing people from Mexico, it seems like a common theme. And if you want to take a moment, get your response entered in the chat. I'll give just like 10 more seconds to see if we can get a little bit more feedback from the audience. Okay, I'm going to ask you a second question via the chat. And again, we'd love to have you respond to this. So our second question, looks like a few more coming in. Second question to you all via the chat, same drill. You type your response in, hit enter whenever you're ready. And please, again, make sure that your responses are going to all panelists and attendees. Question for you now is, what are you hoping to get out of today's webinar? And our panelists will see your responses, so this is a great chance to help them think about how to direct their comments. All right, I'm going to give us about 15 more seconds, see if we can get some responses there in the chat. And would love to hear from you all what you're hoping to get out of today's webinar. So while we hopefully get a few more responses in, just to reflect on some things I'm seeing there in the chat, some ideas about how to teach international visitors to respect the natural resources of Zion National Park. For anybody who's sharing that concern, I would encourage you to look at our previous webinar on educating new to nature visitors. I think there'll be a lot in that webinar, which is on the website, the Red Emerald Resilience Training website. A lot there that would be relevant for that comment. Seeing some interest in how do you attract more international visitors or get international visitors to return. Just some people wanting to better understand where we're at with international travel and what to expect. And just insights about international visitors, with how they relate to the market. And I think we have plans to cover those topics, but I'll just remind our panelists that you can pay a little attention to what's going on in the chat, maybe target your comments to these suggestions via the chat. So with that, I'm going to invite our panelists to join us to come on. So we'll get their videos going. While they do that, a few reminders to our panelists. We want to focus on concrete takeaways today. So as much as you can drive home some takeaways, especially maybe hitting on some of those things you're seeing in the chat, be wonderful. And then just a reminder that our current and future webinar viewers are likely to have a range of familiarity with and skills related to these topics. So please target your ideas to a range of audiences. And with that, let's jump in. As I am sure our viewers know well, there has been a huge increase in domestic visitors here in Utah and elsewhere in the West over the last 2 years. So Lance, I'm going to ask you to help frame up our conversation by telling us a bit about why we should be thinking about international visitors despite this huge surge in domestic visitation. And I'll have Lance go, and then I think I'll pass it to Rachel.
Yeah, I'd be glad to speak to that. Absolutely. So it has been a kind of a weird phenomenon. Again, up until 2019, I was joking around that here at Ruby's Inn, I was kind of like a farmer's almanac, and I could tell you, this is going to be busy and that's going to be slow, and this is our need periods, and this is when you can go on vacation. And then, of course, for 2020, that all went out the window. And here at Bryce Canyon, we have an extremely high amount of international visitors on the standard year, again, 2019 and before, to the tune of almost 60% of our visitors that come to the Bryce Canyon area are international. And you can imagine that during 2020, when the international was cut off, that was a huge thing for us. I mean, 60% of our business evaporated overnight. And one phenomenon that we've seen in the hotel industry the last couple of years is this phenomenon. We talk about rate, high rates. If you've traveled lately, especially to, national parks or ski resorts or wherever, hotel rates are, quite high right now. And that's been a blessing, because it's been able to, especially with the inflationary, pressures, things like that. Make a long story short, a lot of hotels are looking at that phenomenon and saying, wow, all these, this drive market, again, international customers aren't here. So, as an organization, and I think most organizations throughout the state went into this market mode where you draw, 5-hour circle around you and say, okay, these are the people that we can market to and come see us. And, for the last year and a half, with some, dips because of Delta, things like that, it's been a successful strategy. And, but I can tell you that there's a lot of hotels, and there's been a lot of turnover in the industry too. A lot of people left the industry. Maybe they got laid off because of COVID. So there's a bunch of new GMs and revenue managers and group sales managers out there. And they're kind of looking at this and saying, why would we ever accept these international travelers again? You got to discount, and you got to deal with tour operators, to do the masses. I mean, obviously, they're going to book conventional ways quite often. But for the most part, if you want to get an international program, you got to deal with tour operators and travel agents, things like that. So anyway, but I can tell you that if you make a short-term decision to not take these customers, and again, they're coming back. We're seeing them right now. Every time I go down through the lobby, I'm hearing French and German and Dutch and all those languages we used to hear all the time. And if you make the short-term decision to not take that business when it's coming back, again, you might be leaving a little rate. Maybe you got to discount a little bit. Maybe say, why should I do that? This is a proven market. There's a lot of customers right now that are coming to see us who I don't think they're going to come back every year once the world opens up. A lot of displaced customers out there, a lot of people that Disneyland, go on cruises, airlines, things like that. And those people, when everything opens up again, they're going to go out there, and we're going to need this international market to keep us normal. Anyway, I'll pass it on to the next person.
Okay, I think that was me. Yeah, I mean, as Lance said, we've been fortunate enough to have this domestic visitation boom, this drive market. We were fortunate enough to continue to market both domestic and internationally during the pandemic, and attract new visitors, new to nature, which we're learning how to message to, as you heard in our last Red Emerald resilience webinar. But the international visitor and marketing to that visitor is a long-term commitment. On average, the international visitor spends more than the domestic visitor, has a higher on average length of stay. For example, the Belgian visitor stays in Utah 6 to 7 nights. The Australian visitor tends to spend 7 to 8 nights in Utah. And looking out, the recovery forecasts reflect will surpass international visitation numbers by 2024. So for most markets, we're looking probably more like 2026 for China because of their zero COVID model and slower recovery models. So it does feel kind of a long-term game. But what that means is, that the inbound operators, receptives, and the wholesalers are contracting right now for 2023, and they're looking out to booking for 2023. And this is really another marketing channel for hoteliers and guides and outfitters and our suppliers. And it's at a lower rate or a wholesale rate, but it ends up being a marketing tool, just as you would have with an online travel agent or an OTA. So in really simple terms, international visitors are coming back, and we've been marketing to them. We've been fortunate to be able to stay top of mind during the pandemic through various channels. And we've kind of reactivated our call to action marketing in the past few months. We've executed a few sales missions in the UK and France. We'll be in Germany this month. It's already May. I was going to say next month, but it's May now. And to launch the new Eurowings Discover flight, which is a new direct flight from Frankfurt to Salt Lake. So we can talk a little bit more about what's happening with flights and other things coming up. But, international is a long-term game and a commitment from all of us to think about this high spend, high value visitor and what that means for a visitor economy, and to start planning for that for this year and next year and for years to come. So that's kind of where I'll leave the thoughts on that.
Thanks for that, Rachel.
I would just like to add very quickly that to emphasize what Rachel said, for the ski industry, we love international skiers and we're chomping at the bit to get them back, because our international visitors stay 7 to 14 nights and ski about 10 days and spend upwards of $350 a day. So those of you who are on the call who are part of the ski industry, that's why we want international visitors back.
Perfect. I appreciate that. And we will circle back to the airport and some of these themes. For now, I want to just emphasize that you all have talked about how important international visitors are for the tourism economy, and just raise some important points for why they're so important. So that raises the next question, which is, well, how do we encourage them to return? Lance, I'm going to turn that one to you again to kick us off.
Well, as I said in my intro comments, it's important to keep those relationships that we've built for a long time. Here at Ruby's Inn, again, it's no accident that 60% of our customers before COVID were international. We've been working for those with those relationships with those tour operators for a long time. But just being welcoming, just kind of dusting off the international the signage, the little customs, the little a lot of our staff is multilingual, and just kind of bringing those tools out. I think that all those things are important to welcoming the customers back, realizing, and I noticed in some of the chat, talking about the how to make sure that they're doing the right thing when they visit and things like that, and realizing that they haven't traveled for a while. We're rusty at this. We haven't been traveling long distance for a while. If I went to Europe, I'm sure I'd do 99 things that are wrong, and I'm sure that as they come back, there's going to be that education, that learning curve. So a little bit of patience as we get our customers, as we educate customers again. So I think just being welcoming, again, dusting off those things. We did this as a state for a long time, and I think we did a great job, and we just need to dust off those customs and things like that we've been doing for a long time.
So in a moment, we'll dig a bit more into actually how to welcome the visitors. I'd love, Rachel, if you can talk a little bit about what the state's doing to actually try to encourage folks to come to the state and build on what Lance just said.
Yeah, as I said, we've been fortunate to continue our marketing, and as we go into market, we're kind of rebuilding what it means to visit Utah. I saw in the chat there was a question about sentiment and their thoughts about coming maybe to the US or to Utah. And from what we can tell from, social media sentiment and general consumer sentiment, as well as anecdotally from tour operators and the media, is that sentiment is positive. There's pent-up demand. They're so excited to be back in the US and to kind of bring back that, cross-cultural opportunity of travel. Travel's the one kind of people-to-people sharing that's quite positive and we all enjoy and love and cherish. So that's kind of universal, and we're hearing that in every market and every discussion we have. So that's something quite valuable that we're able to share as we go into these markets and work with the media and the trade. And some of the things we're doing is, and what we've been able to do is just continue to tell Utah's story through our social media, through our media, and inspire traveling to Utah. One of the great trends we're seeing, both that we're seeing domestically and internationally, is, everyone saved up their money, so they're willing to spend a little more on their trips and, spend an extra night in one area, spend more money on their lodging, spend more money on fine dining, spend more money on local, local guides, local outfitters. So the savings and pent-up demand has optimized our opportunities for not just luxury, but for kind of cultivating local. And I think this is how we can welcome them in a uniquely Utah way and really encompass what we have, because we've developed all this new product, all these new experiences. And as a result of our domestic opportunities in most areas, of course, some areas haven't fared as well as others. Areas like Lance's that rely more on international, or areas that rely more on corporate or business travel or meetings, for example. But we have an opportunity to share, the unique and new lodging and guiding experiences that we've cultivated over the past few years that will be completely life-changing experiences for many of these visitors. So that's a good start for us.
And I would just like to say that international visitors or international visitors, overseas travel is first nature to them. We as Americans think traveling overseas is a big bucket list item that we might do once or twice in our lifetime. But for our international visitors travel overseas every year, almost every year. So we shouldn't we should not discount that. Also, our research shows that people since the pandemic, they're really looking forward to doing those bucket list trips. So as we plan our itineraries, we need to think about what else can we add to make our attractions, as great as they are, even better. What can we add? In the ski industry, for instance, and we've been doing this for several years, but we will do it even more now, especially to our visitors from Australia and New Zealand and in the Southern Hemisphere, is to promote the ski and national park tour. Because if you come from an area where it's your summer, it's our winter, and you have Australians have 6 weeks vacation, and I think their government is adding 1 or 2 more weeks to make up for the pandemic. So these people are going to have extra weeks of vacation time. And so if we offer them something that no one else can offer, which is a ski and national park package, that makes us even more attractive. And then to promote those, not just directly to the consumer, because that gets very expensive, but to make sure that those itineraries are in the tour operators' brochures so they can promote them for us. So that's my take on how do we encourage them to return. Be sure and think about bucket lists and what can you add to your existing itinerary.
Anything else you guys want to add on that topic? Okay, I'm going to build on that one to say that makes me want to move back to New Zealand. I miss all that vacation time. And two, I love being here because Utah's pretty awesome. So there's a lot to market, as we know all too well. So I want to dive into this question of not just how do we encourage the international guests to come back, but how do we truly welcome them? I'm going to build on Lance's point that maybe we're a little bit rusty when it comes to welcoming our international visitors. Rachel, I know you've thought a lot about this topic, so I'm going to pitch this one to you. There have been very few international visitors in many parts of Utah for the last few years, as our chat comments suggest. What are your thoughts? Are we ready for the return of international visitors? What do we need to do to welcome them? What should we be thinking about? And maybe you can build on some of the things Lance has already said.
Yeah, I mean, again, we know this. We welcomed the world for a long time, and we're used to this, but we might need to refamiliarize ourselves with the needs of certain visitors and their cultural nuances, or just helping them to feel more comfortable. And this might mean asking if our European visitors would like ice in their drink or not. It seems quite simple, but just training your new wait staff. And I know we've had a lot of turnover and new people in the industry managing our restaurants, and hiring lots of new people, and guiding them on standard tipping, either including it on a menu or talking to wait staff about helping them understand our tipping processes. And this is even just for kind of European visitors who it might seem like we've had our French and Germans here for so long, you don't need to provide any guidance to them, but these might still be visitors that haven't been to the US for a long time, or just don't remember standard tipping processes. And the pandemic instilled kind of globally this, sustainable, eco-conscious, soul awakening component in every traveler, this mindset. So, try to avoid using plastic cutlery, and definitely no styrofoam in your to-goes and your breakfast items, and just kind of think about what that means for that traveler, because this is what they're seeing in other countries and other markets. Just try to be sustainable in small ways, because that will go a long way in their visitor experience. If you're a guide or outfitter, look to hire local guides that do speak languages. We have some of the largest language speakers here in Utah that speak the most languages, young population that speaks many languages that you could pull from for seasonal work, that you could look into. I know it's a difficult workforce right now, but really try to be creative in how you're hosting, and maybe look at ways that you can present, for instance, archaeology or astronomy tours that are less scientific jargon, because even if they're English, they speak English, sometimes using a lot of scientific words can be a little bit difficult. And again, we have this luxury opportunity where people are using a lot of funds when they travel. So upsell that extra room night, that suite, that guided experience that gets you a little bit more as an outfitter. Don't sell yourself short. These people are ready to spend money just as our domestic visitors are, and your services are worth the money. We actually hosted market-specific webinars with U.S. Commercial Service, and can include some of these resources about some of these markets when we send out some of the resources with all of you in this webinar as well. And make sure, just because these markets have such strong consumer laws, that you're not including hidden costs, that the costs are what they are, and that you're kind of packaging things together and making it real clear if they're kind of purchasing right up front with you. We kind of do that anyway, but sometimes if there's a hidden fee at the end, it can really sour that relationship. So I know I put a lot in there, but it's just little tidbits to think about.
And I just want to emphasize, thank you, Rachel, for being willing to share some of those resources after the fact. We will put those in the summary for the session. So just know for the audience that those will be in the summary. And I think Rachel raises some really important points, little things like tipping that we just take as part of our culture, not necessarily the case in very many other cultures. So just becoming mindful of those things again and leveraging these existing resources to remind us of some of those things to be sensitive to. Raelene, Lance, anything you want to add to what Rachel just said?
I would just like to say there's one thing that in our ski industry that has bothered me since we started doing international marketing is most of the international guests speak English, some of them better than us, but not all of them. And I'm always surprised when I ride a certain lift where there are safety instructions that need to be shared with the guests on that lift, that the person sharing those speaks very quickly. I can hardly understand them. They don't need to speak louder, which sometimes we tend to do with international guests. We just need to speak slower and more succinctly and not use jargon that we as Americans or Westerners know. And that would be my comment, to have your employees think about to whom they're speaking and to make sure that they speak in a slow enough manner that they can be understood, especially when it comes to safety issues.
Raelene, I really appreciate that. And I think some of these practices might be things that are just good practices in general, right? Communicating a little more slowly, a little more clearly, avoiding the jargon probably helps us all and make sure that everybody's getting that safety message. And I also just want to note, Carly put a comment in the chat just saying she really liked the point about sustainability efforts in small ways, Rachel. So you got some props for that. And I do think it's those little things, again, those cultural differences we don't pay attention to. And maybe these are good practices regardless. Lance, anything you want to add about welcoming? I know you hit on this a little bit earlier.
No, those ladies, they touched it very, very well.
So I want to take just a moment, remind the audience that we are taking questions from the audience. If you have any questions for the speakers now or as we go forward, please use the Q&A function in your Zoom screen. You can find at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You can enter that or open that, enter a question. So feel free to submit your questions that way. I'm going to take a little bit of a divergence here and just say that I know we're not focusing this session on international workers. However, I know that international workers are a very important part of the tourism ecosystem. So I just want to spend a little time on this topic. I don't want to get too far into the weeds on it. Raelene, can you tell us a little bit about the importance of international workers and especially, what role they have to play in the international tourism economy?
Sure. We in the ski industry rely heavily on the international workers through the J1 visa program. And I know that has been on hold for the past 2 years. But the beauty of this, of the workers that come from other countries is that primarily they're college students. And so they're here to work. They're not here to play and visit, although they do like to visit our national parks and ski while they're here. They're here to work. And so they make great employees. They also provide the languages that we need. They become ski instructors. They are lift operators. They work in our restaurants and our hotels. And so they provide the languages that we need to assist other guests. And then when they finish their tour, if you will, of working, they return to their countries and they act as ambassadors for us. They go back and talk about how great our snow is and about how great the people are here and how easy it is to get around. So for those 3 reasons, among many others, we really rely and appreciate the work that our international employees give to our industry.
I'm going to build on that and then maybe pass it additionally to Rachel and Lance to add to what Raelene said. A natural follow-up question to what Raelene has said is that this question about J1 visas and what's going on with J1 visas for international visitors or for international workers. And I don't want to go too far into that rabbit hole. We could do a whole session on just the J1 visa situation. I am guessing though that our audience is curious to hear what's going on with J1 visas. And Lance, I know you know a bit about this, so I'm going to ask you just to give us a brief update without going too far into the weeds about what's going on with J1 visa.
Sure, absolutely. Well, like Raelene says, the J1s, the students, again, so many of them are college age and they're very energetic and they bring a special flavor and a very just an international feel to your property. And again, for so many years, while we were having those high international numbers of visitors, it was, again, much of my staff is multilingual. I've got, especially once you get into the Eastern Europeans, if you speak Romanian, well, then you can understand Italian, you can understand French and those Latin based languages. And yeah, they bring a lot of energy. And we're out here in the sticks. I mean, we live in Garfield County. Our peak season need for employees is 600. Our year-round staff is a little over 200. So we have this huge need for seasonal labor, just like the ski resorts. Again, ski resorts, they're open during the winter, and that's when they need their labor. So it's a very complementary relationship. But I'll tell you that the J1s are coming back. The last year we could have used them, but they had so many issues with COVID and the embassies and stuff like that. But they are coming back, and for places like Garfield County, where the effective unemployment rate, I know they say 3%. I don't know. I can't find 3% of people that don't have a job. As I say, the reality is that if somebody wants a job, they got to have it. And these international programs like this, these students have allowed us to leverage our growth, and because we can get the seasonal labor to come in and help us during our season, then it helps us to grow and grow more year-round jobs as well. But I'll tell you again, having international staff, or a small piece of it that is international, helps with the international visitors. Again, any language issues, culture issues, heads up, hey, don't use that color of tablecloth because that's for a funeral type thing. We've had a lot of little faux pas like that and stuff that have we've been able to avoid because of those international students.
Raelene, Rachel, Lance, anything you want to add about sort of the status of international workers? I'm particularly interested, just because this is not a topic I know a lot about, is are those J1 visas really coming back? Can people get international workers, or is that still sort of a challenge?
Even at its best, I'll tell you, it was always a challenge. There's so many levels of bureaucracy. That being said, we do it because we need to do it. Again, we have this huge need for seasonal labor, and they're definitely coming back. Like I say, the rest of the world's opening up, and we've got a lot of great students working for us right now, and they come in waves. They are students, so they can only come for about 4 months at a time. On either their summer break or during a semester as an intern or something like that. But again, great kids, a lot of fun having them.
I'll just add, the only challenge that we have in the industry with the J1 visas is that it is for 4 months. And so resorts have to choose, do they want them for the beginning of the season, or do they want them for the end of the season? But they work through it, and it works great. And we love to have them, like Lance said.
And I'll tell you, about a month ago, we went back and participated in U.S. Travel's Destination Capitol Hill. And that was the number one topic with the legislators. We met with all the representatives and the 2 senators from the state of Utah, and the J1. And before there was the J1, there was the H-2B visa. That's not as convenient as it used to be. Up until 2008, that was kind of the king of visas. Now it's the J1. But man, if they could fix that H-2B program, that would really solve a lot of our labor concerns.
Maybe some high-level opportunities for making that encouraging more international workers.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to take a moment and detour a little bit from some of the questions I wanted to ask. We have a really great, and I think a really important question in the Q&A, which is that so far what's been shared is a lot of great tips for individual businesses, and curiosity to hear more about what would be some recommendations for destination management organizations or county tourism offices. What can they do to prepare? What can they do to encourage more international visitors?
Well, I think the role of most DMOs is that education, that facilitation of those contracts and those contacts. Here in Garfield County, we go as a business, we're able to go to those trade shows and meet with people and spend the money to go out. And again, it's such a big part of our business. We have the money to do that. But if you're a smaller business, most DMOs, if they don't have a contact list of who's doing business in your area or who you can do business with in your area, then they'll know who to call at the state. If you're out there in let's say Juab County, and you call your person, the DMO, and they say, I have no idea. I've never gone to a trade show. I don't know anything about international business, but they know they can call the UOT and talk to Rachel, and they can say, well, here's some opportunities for you, some contacts. Again, there's so many of these tour operators that are hungry for new product, new things to sell, whether that's, and a lot of it needs to be authentic. You might say, well, I'm just a little tour operator and I take 5 people hiking every day, and how would I ever get into international business? But there's so many opportunities, and so much of the business model has changed during COVID, and part of that is just a change in labor. A lot of companies have gone out and upgraded their technology to where, 2 or 3 years ago, much of the international tourism, the way we got bookings and things like that was still, some companies were still using a fax machine. And now, that so much of their technology is better to where they can interface. If you've got a computer system, maybe you subscribe to some system online, they can interface with that, and you're getting international bookings, and all you got to do is that initial contact and set up, and then it's very little maintenance after that.
I would just like to add that everyone should be attending the Utah Tourism Conference, because the UOT brings in their international reps, and it's an opportunity for you as either a DMO or an individual business to meet with these representatives and just share what your county or your community has to offer. So this year it's in Vernal in September. If you haven't already registered, I would encourage you to do so.
Yeah, thanks, Raelene. That was a good segue. We will have all of our reps back who haven't been back to Utah together since 2019. So it's going to be bittersweet. We will have our DMO one-on-ones, which will allow all of our DMO partners to meet with our reps, one-on-one appointments, talk about what we're doing in market. And we encourage all of our DMO partners to, meet with us and talk about what level you want to work with us. We have a lot of opportunity to work closer with the Utah Office of Tourism that are at no cost, being involved in webinars, supporting other efforts that doesn't involve you attending a trade show because if you're not able to budget-wise or otherwise. And then of course we can talk about which trade shows make sense for you to participate in. And I also encourage kind of regional collaboration. So if you are, Juab or Sevier or, Box Elder, or someone that, maybe could join, Box Elder and Cache could join forces, look at your surrounding county partners and, what makes the most sense from a regional collaborative point of view to approach international from that perspective. One county approaching something might make sense for Garfield County, or Greater Zion, Washington County, but may not make sense from perspective of just Juab or just Box Elder. So let's think of regional areas. We're focusing on kind of northern Utah possibilities right now and looking at regional perspectives. So I think we need to think about this regionally and maybe across county lines, co-oping in that way. And all of our rep firms create, kind of annual fiscal year opt-in opportunities. Again, some of these you can pay for, some you can just join webinars or join to participate in at no cost. So as a DMO, your level of comfort, and then talk to us about that. As far as, recovery models and what we're looking at, which was another one of those questions, we're really looking at, our Canada and Mexico are still the top markets for recovery. Mexico was mentioned earlier by one of the chats, and I was looking at our top 5 international markets by visitation for 2020, and Mexico's ranked number 2. In the past, Mexico's been ranked, number 7 for visitation. So, the borders being a little bit more free flowing for Mexico during the pandemic did help Mexico with its rankings. And Mexico, is still a pretty seasonal ski market for us, but it has helped to have that kind of free flowing. We are seeing Europeans booking for late summer and fall. But the European recovery still doesn't really, we still don't see a lot of those recovery models until next year, which is why we're planning for next year and want everyone to start contracting for next year. So just a few updates there as far as kind of working with local DMOs, and of course work with your local tourism office and economic development offices if you're a supplier, a hotelier or guide or outfitter or otherwise.
Rachel, thanks for picking up on those questions in the chat. A reminder to our audience, if you have questions for the panelists, please submit those via the Q&A function. Jessica, we appreciate you migrating those over into Q&A just so we can keep those separate from our chat conversation. Raelene and Lance, anything you want to add, either picking up on what Rachel said or what you saw in the chat?
I think as far as the markets that are recovering very quickly, Canada and Mexico are a little bit unique, and I know Mexico for the ski might be a little different as far as the products that come in on things like that. But for years, Canada was under the radar for me because Canada doesn't book the same way that a German does or a French person or something like that through these traditional tour operators. Quite often, they're booking through the same channels that the Americans are, either on your own website or coming through Expedia or Booking.com, some type of an OTA type booking. So, but maybe Rachel can speak a little bit more to this as far as, it's very hard to do direct marketing in Canada, as far as, again, I can cover most of Germany. I can go work with 10 operators and they cover 90% of Germany, but Canada, Mexico isn't the same animal. You have to, market to those guys much the way you market to your domestic customers. And maybe that's a good thing because, if you're looking at those international markets. But anyway, that's just some of my thoughts, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
although for
right.
for the ski industry in Canada, we do work really closely with the tour operators, and many of the visitors do book through the ski tour operators and wholesalers. As far as markets rebounding, we're headed to Australia next week, and they are coming on very strong because, again, they've been this pent up demand. They haven't been able to leave their country for 2 years. And so they are ready to book. And Jessica, for you, I know this is not new to you, but partnering with Ski Utah and the Utah Office of Tourism and others makes a lot of sense, especially for a DMO. There are several cooperative opportunities that we have going to ski shows and other things that you can partner with us on. So don't hesitate to give us a call or Rachel and see how you can work with us.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, that's why we focus so heavily on Canada's PR and media and run OTA or online travel agency campaigns for the most part. And our traditional tour operator work is in the ski realm in Canada for the most part. So, yep, well said, Raelene.
Hearing some good offers of partnerships. Want to remind our audience that we do have these great partners, Office of Tourism, Ski Utah, and others that you can work with to even figure out where you should be putting your energy, not to mention how to do so. I want to start to wrap us up. I have one sort of two-part question I'm going to ask our panelists to respond to. In prior conversations with the panelists, they emphasized the fact that we have a new Salt Lake City airport and there's some changes going on with that, as well as there's a role that these more international reaching events can play in the return of international visitors. So I'm going to ask our speakers just to talk a little bit about those different dynamics, the airport, these international events, what role those can play, and maybe how people can, whether you're a DMO or a local business, how you can capitalize on those opportunities. Rachel, can I maybe have you start us off?
Yeah, sure. Of course, the rebuild at the airport is a big thing for all of us, regardless of where you're located in the state. This leads to more international flights, more capacity. Not only this new Eurowings Discover flight that I mentioned coming on in May, which is part of Lufthansa network, which opens up bookability for Lufthansa, which is a pretty big deal for us, but we've brought on Air Canada, which hasn't been back in the market from Toronto as a direct flight since 2017. And all of our transatlantic flights will be back in action, including our London flight by May 14th. So, and we are expecting Seoul, that direct flight from Seoul to Salt Lake at some point. We keep being told it'll happen. It's not if, it's when. So, with Asia's slower recovery, we just know that's going to be pushed further out. So this really puts Salt Lake City and Utah, on the map for the Western US. It becomes a major international hub. And we expect this in the next 5 years to increase our international flights exponentially. So for us, that means, marketing opportunities, partnership opportunities, and more opportunities for our DMO partners, for our suppliers, and international visitation and spending will increase. We don't know what the forecasting, what that model looks like as we continue to partner with different airlines, but all positive, all good news, and not just for leisure travel, for business travel, for opportunities for entrepreneurship. I mean, everything you can think of for the state. I know we're already in the top 1 to 3 in every Forbes and business list, but that will continue with this airport. And the proximity to some of these flights expanding and adding additional flights into Vegas, which we saw with the Eurowings Discover flight, is also good because that's a major gateway for Southern Utah. Do you want me to speak to events now, or?
Want to say a little bit about this? That'd be great. And then we'll pass it to Raelene and Lance.
Okay. And when it comes to the events, any positive visibility about our destination is good. We have the World Ironman competition in St. George. We have the All-Star Game in Salt Lake coming up. This always gives, positive visibility. This helps us with our kind of natural marketing and pitching and storytelling when we're meeting with journalists, and can highlight our volunteerism and, our amazing landscapes. And I'll kind of pitch it to Raelene and Lance to add to that when we talk about our events and what this brings to us as a destination and how we can leverage that.
Thanks, Rachel. We all saw an increase in visitation after the 2002 Olympic Winter Games, and we're very excited that the Salt Lake Organizing Committee is pitching Salt Lake City again to host the games in possibly 2030 or 2034. So we're keeping our eye on that. The Outdoor Retailer Show is coming back to Salt Lake City soon, and that brings a lot of suppliers here, so and media as well. The Sundance Film Festival is another opportunity for us to really get our name out in the international arena. These are 3 events that are very winter focused, but things like Rachel said, the NBA All-Star Game this year is coming in February. And if you've ever traveled internationally, or if you've ever had an international guest stay at your property or visit your attraction, you know that they, for the most part, are pretty up on the NBA players, and they follow their players from their country. And so, that is an opportunity for us to take advantage of and get them going to the game and letting them know that Salt Lake City is the host for that. And also, when these sporting events take place in our community, the media, they show beautiful images of our mountains and of our city and the national parks. And so we shouldn't discount that at all, because that media exposure is huge for us. So I want to thank all those who are involved in bringing those events to Utah, because it does help all of us.
Lance, any final thoughts?
No, just my thoughts on the new airport is I think that's indeed a new opportunity. Here in Southern Utah, especially in the Mighty Five and the National Park country, so many of our itineraries are built around international flights to Las Vegas or LA or even San Francisco airports. And I think, for the most part, ski, there's only ever been 2 or 3 direct flights into Salt Lake City historically. And I think for Northern Utah, so much of that either went up to Yellowstone or it was ski product. And I think, especially for the northern part of the state, this is a perfect time. But maybe you haven't got a lot of international business over the years. I think that this is the time when those itineraries, as Rachel said, the state spent a lot of time building those itineraries in the north. And I think we're on the cusp of Northern Utah seeing those international visitors the same way we see them in the national parks down here.
If I could just add one more thing about the airport.
Quickly.
I believe it's very important for us to share with our employees that we speak positively about the airport. It's not complete yet. And so some of those issues of time to walk from the B concourse to the baggage claim is long. And if we can be positive, then that translates to positivity to our guests. So just wanted to say that.
Perfect. Thank you for that. I am going to wrap us up. We are always trying to get our audience out of here on time. So thank you, panelists, for your suggestions, your advice, your inspiration. I want to take a moment, just turn it back to our audience before we wrap up. So we just want to hear from the participants real quickly what you are taking away from this session. We're going to do this again via chat. So for those of you who are on early, you'll hopefully remember how to do this. We're going to pitch a question to you via chat, have the chat function open. You can respond via chat, and please make sure that your response is going to everyone, the panelists and the audience. So again, we'd love to hear from you all via chat. Just what is one thing you are taking away from this training? And we hope there are many things, but please pick one. We'd love to hear from you via chat. You can just type your response in and hit enter whenever you're ready. Give just a little bit more time to get some thoughts into the chat. While those are coming in, I'm seeing real responses for partner, collaborate, leverage these existing resources, whether that's partners or existing tools. Some focus on Mexico and Canada. That's what I'm also seeing. Making sure to have conversations with people who are working in this space. Heard a number of events you all might want to get involved in if you're trying to figure out how to tap into international markets. So if you have other thoughts, please share those via the chat. We'd love to hear from the audience. I do want to wrap us up again so we can get out of here on time, or as close to time as possible. So we hope, again, you all have gained a lot of insight from this webinar. I'm hoping you're taking away some concrete ideas. Just want to remind you that this webinar it is being recorded. It will be posted on our website along with the recordings of our past webinars, and we will post future webinars there. So here's our website again. You can check that out. You can register for future events or check out our past events. We hope to see you at our upcoming sessions. Our next session will be on June 7th from 12 to 1 o'clock Mountain Time, with the focus of, as the slide indicates, how to find funding resources to alleviate any negative impacts caused by COVID-19. So again, you can learn more about that session, register on our website. We do want to make sure we get your feedback so we can continue to improve our future sessions. So please look for an automatic survey that will be sent right after this webinar. It should only take you a minute or two to complete. Your doing so will really help us, again, make sure we're meeting the needs and making sure that our webinars are helpful. So thank you in advance for providing that feedback. And then finally, just a thank you again to our panelists. Thank you to our audience, especially those of you who chimed in. We'd love to hear from the audience. And we hope to see many of you at our next training session on June 7th. Thanks, everybody.